All right, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Today's talk is going to be on relaxation techniques, how to relax under pressure when you're playing league matches. And we're going to, because we've got a lot to get through, we're basically going to compress a very large subject into half an hour. We'll save questions for the end. But let's get started. So in tennis, basically, there's 5 relaxation techniques in tennis. And when you combine them together, they give you a psychological booster rocket, not only before a match, but during a match. We're going to go through them now. The first one is positive body language. So positive body language. The mind affects the body, but the body also affects the mind. Body language, when we look at body language, players playing tennis, body language is an indication that a player is managing the mistake or letting the mistake manage them. So examples, acting surprised, reacting like they're in a scary movie, or slumping over and looking dejected are typical negative body language expressions in tennis. And we can tell a lot about how competitive someone is by looking at their eyes. Parents in particular know more than the coach when it comes to their child's subtler negative body language. But positive body language is a powerful tool in getting the mind to be strong. A study, lots of studies have been done on this, but a recent study on nonverbal body language on sports performance for professional tennis players in 2019 showed that nonverbal body language affects performance. There's a direct correlation between your body language on the court and the how you play, how good you play. I think of Eugene Bouchard. She's a Canadian player who became famous because she sued the federation for slipping in the changing room, in the locker room at the US Open. But when she first came on the scene, she had the eye of the tiger. She had the confident fighter image. And so for tennis players, we're looking for a good physical action response. And so, after the point's finished, standing tall with pride, with your chest out, you want to exude confidence, or at least act that way until it becomes second nature. Now, it may seem very silly at first, but trust me, if you keep doing it, you'll see a difference in how you play over time. Positive body language, this technique takes about 2 weeks. So, the first day you do it, it seems silly. That you keep doing it over time, about 2 weeks, then it becomes automatic and you'll see real differences. You think of Leighton Hewitt, he had the lawnmower every time he won a point with his fist pumps. But with the right physical action response, and anyone can do it, everyone can compete like Hewitt. All right, the second relaxation technique is positive thoughts or self-talk. So positive thoughts, self-talk. Do you play coyote tennis? A lot of juniors, when they miss a shot, they go, no. Do you whine after every point? Studies have shown that, and we do this with our members, we just tag their self-talk after points, but studies have shown that 3/4 of all self-talk in tennis is negative. That's adults and juniors. When you wire someone up and tape them, or you just write down what they're saying, phrases like, I hate tennis, I suck, I'm going to quit, this game is so stupid, I'm playing the worst player in the world, I can't believe I hit the ball into the bottom of the net, that's so bad. These are very common and highly repetitive phrases in tennis. And really, if you feel sorry for yourself, you've already given up. I think there's a very famous soccer manager in England, a French soccer manager who managed Arsenal for 20 years. And he had a very good phrase: unless you have the ability to manipulate your beliefs over the performance cycle, it's difficult to perform well at anything. Just like body language, changing how you think and talk to yourself changes how you feel about yourself, which is what mental toughness is really all about. You know, disconnecting thoughts or thoughts that are distracting you from what you're trying to do on a tennis court create distractions that make it harder to focus at the task in hand. And so the idea of positive self-talk and positive thoughts is to replace negative thoughts with self-talk and positive thoughts. And so doing that clears the computer so you can move on. And it's very, just like positive body language, is very quick and easy to do and has a big effect on your emotions within basically the same as positive body language within weeks of trying it. I think of a very famous example is Andy Murray. Andy Murray rise to becoming a Grand Slam champion is a good example. Andy Murray crawled his way to number 4 in the world, basically as a defensive specialist. You know, prior to his work with Ivan Lendl, he hit more drop shots and approach shots. But with Ivan Lendl's help, he became more offensive. He became basically mentally and emotionally stable. Now, Ivan Lendl, when he was playing tennis, he had a psychologist called Alexis Castori. Alexis Castori, maybe not a lot of people maybe noticed about Ivan Lendl, but in the 80s, before he became successful, winning 9 US Opens in a row, getting to the final of 9 US Opens in a row, he was called the Czechoslovakian. Ivan Lendl, when he was coaching Andy Murray, brought on Alexis, a sports psychologist, to help Andy Murray. And Alexis knew pretty quickly from observing and interviewing Andy Murray that he had to reduce what we call self-inflicted pressure. And so basically, she trained Andy Murray to have a tough inner voice. You know, the mind is not a garbage can that you feed with rubbish. So, you know, Andy Murray practiced basically catching negative thoughts and throwing them away. And this is analogous to a tennis match. You know, when a negative thought enters your head, you just replace it with a positive thought and hit it back and hit the positive thought back over the net. And again, just like positive body language, if you do and say something long enough, it starts to become a part of you. And a great example of this is Muhammad Ali's chant, "I am the greatest." Now, maybe not a lot of people maybe know this about Muhammad Ali, but his chant was actually an act. At first, and he reported he did not even believe in his now famous line. Yet he promised himself to keep repeating it inwardly and outwardly. And over time, he persuaded not only himself, but practically everyone on planet Earth into believing him. So acting really is believing. I say it seems silly at first, but if you keep doing it, really 2 weeks, which is no time at all in terms of developing as a player. That's no time at all. But every player should develop an inward sharp. You know, it should highlight a strength you want to achieve or you think you have. You know, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fiercest of them all? I'm always up for the challenge. I'm thankful for the opportunity. I'll give 100% fighting effort. These are chants that you can, you know, I'll have no fear. But it's acting as if you're always in control. So you really want to try and develop a chart for yourself. It's about, you know, you want to convince yourself that you love tiebreakers. You love overheads. You know, you're a tireless worker. It's about convincing yourself that you love the wins. You love the sun because your opponent hates it. And it's just, at first, you know, it doesn't seem as though it's going to work, but over 2 weeks, it starts to click in, and you start to become confident, and that affects how you perform. You know, it's about you really, and you know, if you convince all those that watch you that you are going to get to where you want to go, then you've succeeded. But with positive thoughts and positive body language, these two relaxation techniques, you can make the other person think and feel that they're going to lose, even if you're losing. Now, obviously, you know, you can't eliminate all negative thoughts and physical responses. It's just not natural to be emotionally positive throughout an entire match. And it's also not realistic. You know, we call flatlining. But when you do get frustrated, you know, after a point, you want to go for what we call a high negative to a high positive emotional state before the next point starts. You know, it's going to be a high negative to a high positive followed by a specific or thinking about how you're going to play the next point. Of course, having said that, you shouldn't be putting yourself on an emotional roller coaster by getting frustrated after every point. The aim is to minimize it. But, on some points where you're going to get frustrated, that's fine. It's actually healthy, I think, to get frustrated, but you want to go from a high negative to a high positive. And sports psychologists sum this up as follows. High negative, you whine. High positive, you shine. Low negative, you coast. Low positive, you coast. Low negative, you're toast. There's a final point on positive thoughts and self-talk. Changing shirts between sets is a very good tool that needs to be ingrained in players, because it's like a psychological reset button. All right, the third relaxation technique is actually called relaxation. It's trying to relax your muscles physically. So we actually call it relaxation techniques. What does this mean? Well, along with cognitive anxiety, players also suffer from physical, or what we call somatic anxiety. And symptoms of physical anxiety are muscle tenseness and poor breathing. Physical anxiety, I'm sure everyone knows this, physical anxiety inhibits movement and causes players to swing a lot slower. Now, these smart rackets, you can put chips on the end of your racket handle, and they advertise, it tells you what spin you're hitting and all the rest of it. But really, the real power of those chips is that it tells you your swing speed. And obviously, if you're getting tired, that's a factor. But normally, when we look at the data coming back, we look at swing speeds. It's an indication of how nervous you are. Obviously, the speed of the ball coming towards you is a factor as well. If you're getting outgunned, then that's obviously going to skew the data. But assuming you're not getting outgunned, swing speed during points tells us your level of nervousness. There's a strong correlation between that. In worst cases, muscle tightness can actually cause physical injuries. And we think about 40%, 50%, almost 50% of injuries in tennis are caused by muscle tightness. Breathing, the opposite of breathing is to choke. And so taking short breaths is a real sign of being nervous. And so, physical relaxation techniques are designed to reduce muscle tension and increase oxygen intake. Consciously, obviously on the physical tense, being physically tense, just constantly over tensing and relaxing the muscles, just, scrunching up your shoulders and then relaxing the muscles. That's a good way of you're aware of your muscle, and so you can start to now relax your muscles, actually consciously relax your muscles. And of course, the big one in tennis is bouncing on your toes. Bouncing on your toes quickly eliminates muscle tension. You see professional players on TV doing that all the time, but just bouncing on your toes is the quickest way of just relieving tension. In terms of breathing, consciously taking deep breaths, just constantly breathing in and out. Before the match, during warm-up, between points, that elongates the muscles and also helps with focus, rhythm, and technique. The fourth relaxation technique is visualization. This is a biggie. Visualization. Nobody can play well all the time. But when you're playing badly, it's very easy to lose confidence, or to let the confidence drain out of the balloon. And when this happens, I know we have a neuroscientist with us today, so I'm always a bit nervous when I start getting into neurology. But when this happens, the premotor cortex in the brain, which plans movement and sends those movement messages to what we call the motor cortex. That's the part of the brain where voluntary movement is initiated. And when you send negative visual movements from the premotor cortex to the motor cortex, that produces more negative movements. So positive visualization is a very powerful scientific performance enhancer that prevents this from happening. And visualizing how you perform, that creates optimum learning. Very famous experiment um, um, with basketball players showed that players that visualized and practiced, so they spent half the time visualizing, half the time practicing, got the same results as those that practiced twice as much. And this has been repeated over and over again. And it's why when you watch a professional tennis match for about half an hour and then go out and play, you'll always play better with a more fluid, uninhibited style than if you don't. It's to do with sending positive movement messages from the premotor, stored in the premotor cortex, that then are sent to the motor cortex, which obviously is where voluntary movement is initiated. But really, you know, and we're gonna next week we're gonna do an on-court Zoom meeting, but at some point we're going to talk about how to prepare for a match. And members come up to me all the time and say, well, you know, if I turn up to a match early but I'm unable to hit, what do I do? Visualization, you know, sitting in a car, playing your favorite songs to motivate you and visualizing how you're going to play the match is absolutely critical. Every Grand Slam player that's ever won a Grand Slam has visualized. There's no exception to that. I think of Patrick Rafter. Patrick Rafter credits visualization and positive affirmations with his 2 US Open wins. There's a book, Tim Galloway book, The Inner Game of Tennis, is an excellent resource for laymen on how to remove distractions and really how to quieten the left side of the brain, what we call the logical analytical side, to prevent paralysis from analysis. Now, it's called The Inner Game of Tennis. It's the most popular book ever read. #1 sales book of all time. It became an instant classic when it was published in 1974. But its basic theme is quietening self-interference to lead to an ideal performance state. But a lot of it is basically about, rather than using the left side of the brain, using the right side of the brain to visualize how you're playing. But I would recommend reading The Inner Game of Tennis. It's really the Bible for sports psychology. You know, before moving on to the last relaxation technique, hypnosis is unscientific. It's not proven scientifically. Evidence is anecdotal. I'm a believer in it, but again, just my intuition. But I think hypnosis hypnosis is a form of visualization, and to me, it's visualization on steroids. I mean, to me, it's so powerful. I think it should be banned from sports. There's a very famous example of a boxer, I can't remember his name, who fought Mike Tyson and did hypnosis. It takes about 2 weeks again. These things take about 2 weeks before the effect really starts to improve performance. But he was on a visual hypnosis program for 2 weeks, and he beat Mike Tyson. He credits hypnosis to that. But you know, with hypnosis, you're induced into a trance that strengthens your visualizing your performance. But to me, it's the best way there is, and the quickest way to get players to play without fear, and also play to their full potential. Hypnosis is to me very, very important. Now, before we get on to the fifth relaxation technique, these 4 combined together create a psychological booster rocket that can really help you play relaxed. Think about it, over 80% of the match is between points. So your between point behavior will really make or break you. Now, people think professional tennis players are mentally tougher than the rest of us. That's really not the case. Anyone who watches Andreescu, who won the US Open, Canadian player, and just watch her on-court clips, when her on-court coaching clips, when the coach comes out to coach her, will see that you know, she has the mind of a child at times, very insecure. But you know, all professional players experience the same doubt and helplessness as the rest of us, but they use their between points time to prepare for the next challenge rather than dwelling on the past. And you know, John McEnroe, people say, well, John McEnroe did that, you know, but John McEnroe went from a high negative to a high positive. Yes, his antics is what we see, but from the time the next point started, he was calm. And professional players, obviously, for them, it's automatic. They combine these 4 relaxation techniques into an effective routine before points. Now, this routine has been formalized into a tool known as a 16-second cure, by a very famous sports psychologist in our trade called Jim Lure. And it consists of 4 stages. And it uses these 4 relaxation techniques. Stage 1 is what we call the positive physical response stage, and that's where you kind of exude physical confidence. And that takes between 3 and 5 seconds. Stage 2 is what we call the relaxation. Stage 2 is what we call the relaxation stage. And that takes between about 6 and 10 seconds. And this is where you'll see players looking at their strings. They're going, they're now calming down to get ready for the next point. Stage 3 is called the preparation stage. That takes about 3 to 10 seconds. And this is where tactics and emotions are managed. Cue words, positive self-talk. This is where, stage 3, the preparation stage, is using positive thoughts and self-talk. Stage 1 was using positive body language. Stage 3 is using positive thoughts and self-talk. And they're planning out the point as well. Eye control is important here. The pace of the match is also dictated during this stage. A lot of, particularly juniors, win quick and lose slow. They start to lose, and they're running around, speeding up the match. You want to do the opposite. And stage 4, the final stage, which takes between 3 and 5 seconds, is the ritualization stage. And this is where you become more focused by balancing calmness and intensity. And these rituals, rituals can be both physical and mental. You think of Maria Sharapova walking to the back fence every time. It's rather kind of annoying to watch, but that's an example of a physical ritual. But there's mental rituals as well. And you can obviously do both. And again, we talked about winning and losing, win quick, lose slow. An important ritual between games is to sit down during changeovers. But really, you want to really, and adults are very good at that for the most part. Juniors, not so much. But combining these 4 relaxation techniques, positive body language, positive thoughts, self-talk, physical relaxation techniques, and visualization gives you a huge psychological booster rocket during competition. And these routines basically are a mental trick to tell yourself that every point is the same. With juniors, we don't do it so much about adults, but with juniors, a good pressure test when we're working on this stuff is to practice the 16-second cure routines, or a good pressure test to practice this 16-second cure is to play a tiebreaker when fatigue with a reward is on the line. So that's a very good, we do that obviously with our juniors. Now the 5th one, the most important one, the 5th relaxation technique is goal setting. Goal setting is the most effective performance enhancement strategy there is in sports psychology to improve competitively. Nothing else comes close. Over 80% of all sports studies on goal setting demonstrated a marked improvement in sport performance by 5 to 10%, along with an increase in motivation and commitment. Now, goal setting does a lot of things. Goal setting focuses attention on specific tasks. So we talked about external distractions, disconnecting thoughts. Goal setting reduces those external distractions or disconnecting thoughts because it focuses attention on specific tasks. Goal setting increases effort and intensity. It encourages persistence. And finally, it promotes the development of new goals. Now, most of you, I'm sure, heard of an acronym, SMARTer goals. Goals have to be specific. They have to be measurable. They have to be attainable. They have to be realistic. They have to be time specific. That's a big one. A goal, a dream, a goal without a time is a dream, basically. They got to be enjoyable, and you have to be able to record them. But with goals, obviously, the number one reason people get nervous is because they're trying to control the uncontrollable. You can't control whether you're winning a match. So you really want to try and control what you can already control. And so, there's winning goals, and, but really you want to have a goal, enjoy the process of competing rather than whether you're actually going to win. But most goals should be process goals. I'm not going to hit the net when I'm behind the baseline. I'm going to serve to the backhand when I'm hitting second serves. I'm going to hit down the line or to the net person when I'm inside the baseline. I'm going to come to the net once a game. Rather than outcome goals. But nervousness, fundamentally, when you get nervous, it's because of one or two things. One, you're trying to control the uncontrollable. You want to win, which you shouldn't really focus on. And obviously, the other reason is because you're not prepared. Most players that don't dedicate their lives to playing 5 times a week and are putting in hours and hours on a court, if you're not leading a Spartan life, then you're basically, when you play a match, you're unprepared. And so that's obviously, that's going to cause nervousness because you lack that self-belief. You can't fake confidence. Confidence comes through winning. Winning comes through skills. Skills come through repetition and know-how. But without proper, with juniors, obviously it's critical. Without proper goal-setting guidance from coaches, players can become way too outcome-orientated and base their goals, self-esteem, and self-worth on whether they win. And we see that that's a big problem with juniors. But also with club members, when you play, especially playing doubles, wanting to not mess up, so your partner doesn't get upset with you. These can create nervous situations. But the need to win today is a very toxic goal in terms of developing as a player and being able to compete. So goal setting is critical, and that's something you do ahead of time before you start the match. You're just setting a goal. I'm gonna compete to the best of my ability. I'm gonna try and do these process goals. Winning is a byproduct of success. But if you're in terms of developing as a player, you want to be better next year than you are this year. In terms of skill development, the need to win today really puts tennis players at the mercy of their impulses and a slave to their habits. But those are the 5 relaxation techniques. We'll take questions. But I hope if you have any questions, obviously you can email me as well.